Iraq claims it saved Syria's new president. Intelligence in Baghdad tipped Damascus to a jihadi plot to kill Ahmed al-Sharaa, even as ISIS leaders fell to US raids. Now, Sharaa admits he doesn't trust Israel, but still edges toward a security pact, warning Kurds to integrate or face Turkish war. And in Washington, Syria reopens its embassy, while Trump tells Syrians in America to pack their bags. In an interesting development in the volatile Middle Eastern political landscape, Arabic media reported on September 19th that the Iraqi intelligence alerted Syrian authorities some 6 months ago to an assassination plot against Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa by disgruntled former members of his rebel jihadi group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the HTS. Citing a senior Iraqi security source, Lebanese daily An-Nahar reported that thanks to the Iraqi intelligence, Syria was able to thwart both the assassination plot and a concurrent bombing campaign planned by extremist groups who sought to ignite sectarian violence. Asked who was behind those efforts, the source reportedly said it was former fighters in HTS who defected from it due to their dissatisfaction with the direction in which Sharaa had taken Syria after toppling longtime Iran-backed Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in December 2024. Iraqi security sources cited by An-Nahar said many former HTS fighters, mainly those of Iraqi or Syrian nationality, have joined the Islamic State since the rebel group was dissolved into the Syrian army earlier this year. Syria's state news agency Sana had previously reported that the Islamic State was plotting to assassinate Sharaa in the southwestern city of Daraa in the first week of June, but Syrian authorities denied the report. However, Iraqi sources cited by the newspaper denied a reported plot by pro-Iranian armed groups, including Iraqi militias in Lebanon's Hezbollah, to assassinate Sharaa in the central Iraqi city of Najaf. Meanwhile, the US military on September 19th said it had carried out a raid in Syria that killed a senior Islamic State militant. The Iraqi counterterrorism service said that a senior Islamic State leader was killed in a security operation in Syria carried out in coordination with the US-led international coalition. The US military statement said the raid had killed Omar Abdul Qadir, who was seeking to attack the United States. The statement did not say if any civilians were killed in the raid. The Iraqi service said that the militant known as Abdul Rahman al-Halabi was the group's head of external operations and security. According to the Iraqi service, he was accused of overseeing attacks in multiple countries, including the bombing of Iran's embassy in Lebanon and planning other operations in Europe and the United States that were ultimately foiled through intelligence work. US Central Command has carried out a series of strikes targeting Islamic State figures in Syria. US officials have warned that the group is hoping to stage a comeback in the country following the fall of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad last December. Syrian President Ahmedal-Sharaa said that US-mediated negotiations with Israel are close to reaching an agreement that could be signed soon, similar to the 1974 accord. Al-Sharaa stressed, however, that it did not mean normalization of relations with Tel Aviv. In remarks to the Turkish daily Milliyet, carried by Syrian television on September 19th, Al-Sharaa said Syria knows how to fight but no longer wants war. He added that the recent unrest in Swaida was a deliberately staged trap at a time when talks with Israel were nearing completion. Speaking about the negotiations following the recent attack on Qatar, Al-Sharaa said,
"If the question is whether I trust Israel, the answer is I do not trust it."
Al-Sharaa said that Israel's strike on the presidential palace and the Syrian Ministry of Defense amounts to a declaration of war. At the same time, he stressed that reaching a security agreement with Israel is unavoidable, though Israel's commitment to such an accord remains in doubt. Al-Sharaa noted that his expected participation in the upcoming United Nations General Assembly meetings represents a historic precedent, as it will be the first time in 60 years that a Syrian president takes part in the sessions. He emphasized that this marks a new turning point, adding that Syria has now become part of the international system and is no longer a state known for exporting drugs, refugees, or terrorism. In the same interview, Al-Sharaa also warned of serious consequences if the integration of the Syrian Democratic Forces is not achieved by the end of the year. He revealed that certain factions within the SDF and the Kurdistan Workers' Party had disrupted the March agreement and slowed down the integration process, further complicating the political landscape in northeastern Syria. According to Al-Sharaa, the status quo in the northeast poses a threat to the national security of both Turkey and Iraq. He noted that Ankara had been persuaded not to launch a military operation against SDF, allowing time for negotiations to continue following the eventual fall of the Assad government. However, he issued a stark warning.
If integration is not achieved by December, Turkey may resort to military action.
Earlier, on September 18th, Israeli media outlets reported that a lengthy meeting took place in London between Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer and al-Shibani, with US Ambassador to Turkey Tom Barak mediating. According to Israeli outlets, the 5-hour meeting included Syria's formal response to an Israeli proposal for a security agreement. The same reports, however, suggested skepticism in Tel Aviv, with I-24 News noting that chances of reaching a deal in the near future had receded, despite what it called intensive intervention by US President Donald Trump. These discussions come against the backdrop of persistent Israeli airstrikes on Syrian territory, Israeli military occupation of several posts in southern Syria, and Israeli ground incursions. Publicly, Damascus has condemned Israeli interference and aggression, reiterating that southern Syria remains an integral part of the country. Syria's Foreign Minister Assad Hassan al-Shaibani on September 19th raised the Syrian flag over the embassy in Washington, the first time it has flown there since the diplomatic mission was suspended in 2012. In a statement, the Syrian Foreign Ministry called the ceremony a historic moment, marking the symbolic return of Syria's presence at its embassy in the US capital. Meanwhile, as Syria celebrates the historic moment, the Trump administration is ending the temporary protected status of thousands of immigrants from Syria living in the US, arguing it is not in America's interest to continue the humanitarian program. The Department of Homeland Security said conditions no longer prevent Syrians from returning to their war-ravaged homeland. Syria faced a bloody civil war for over a decade until dictator Bashar al-Assad was ousted last year. Sectarian violence has continued even after the Assad government was overthrown. In a statement, DHS spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin also cited terrorist activity in Syria as additional grounds to terminate the TPS program. Syrians who don't have another legal mechanism to remain in the US once their TPS expires in roughly 60 days will be eligible to be arrested and deported by federal immigration officials. The Trump administration advised Syrians enrolled in the TPS program to self-deport from the US using its CBP Home smartphone app.